Good morning, class. I would like to welcome you to this class, Disaster Management and Ecosystem. Last week, we were looking at terminologies that are used in disaster management. Today, we're going to look at types of disasters, having defined what a disaster is, which is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community beyond the community's capability to control this hazardous event. So there are basically we have two types of disasters. We have man-made disasters and natural disasters. Natural disasters, as the name suggests, is caused by natural events. Examples of these natural events include tornadoes. A tornado is a violent storm. Tornado. T-O-R-N-A-D-O-S. Tornadoes. So these tornadoes, they are violent storms with very strong circular winds over a small area. Violent storms with strong circular winds over a small area. Tornadoes. So it's one example of a natural disaster. And we also have flash floods. We have blizzards. That's examples of natural disasters. So a blizzard, these are blizzards, B-L-I-Z-Z-A-R-D-S, blizzards. So blizzards, these are severe snowstorms with strong winds. Severe snowstorms with strong winds, blizzards. We have earthquakes, epidemics, and volcano eruptions. So these are just some of the examples of natural disasters caused by natural events. And then we have man-made disasters. These man-made disasters are caused by human activities. So we have wars, they are man-made. We have transportation accidents. We have food and water contamination, construction accidents, building collapsing, fire. All these are examples of man-made disasters. If you have questions or something to add before I proceed to characteristic of a disaster. No question? One of the characteristics of a disaster is number of casualties. Number of casualties. C-A-S-U-A-L-T-I-E-S. Casualties. So this is one of the characteristics of a natural disaster. A casualty is a person or is a human being. C-A-S-U-A-L-T-I-E-S. Yes, T-I-E-S. So a casualty is a person or a human being who is injured or killed by or as a client result of incident. So any person who is injured or killed by natural disaster, either being it man-made or natural disaster, that person is called a casualty. So one of the characteristics of a natural disaster is number of casualties. So we have, these casualties are classified into two. We have multiple casualty incident. Yes? You're lost somewhere? Okay. We are looking at number of casualties, a person or human being killed or injured during an incident. Most of these incidents are natural disaster incidents, can be man-made or natural disaster incidents. So we have to, they are classified into two: multiple casualty incident and mass casualty incident. When we're talking of multiple casualty, we are looking at two people but fewer than 100. That's a multiple casualty incident. They should start from 2, but they should not be more than 100. And then we have a mass casualty incident. Mass casualty incident, it should be 100 people or more. That's a mass casualty incident. So people need to prepare for this casualty, especially the mass casualty. So every community is supposed to prepare for this. The community is supposed to get ready that anytime they're going to face natural disasters. That's why we talked of risk assessment. You need to assess communities and let them prepare. Disaster awareness. You communicate, you assess, so that they should prepare. So it is the duty of the community to prepare for this. Another characteristic is the scope of the disaster. The scope of the disaster. This is the range of its impact or effect, the range of its effect, either geographically or in terms of the number of victims. Scope of the disaster, the range of its effect, either geographically or in terms of the number of victims. So I'll give an example when looking at the scope of a disaster, the range of its effect. Let's look at a bus accident that is carrying 100 people. But then it happened that these 100 people died on the spot. That means that accident has got a greater scope compared to a bridge that has collapsed while only 2 cars were crossing. Okay? So we look at the scope. Okay? That's one of the characteristics of a disaster. Another characteristic is the intensity of the disaster. The intensity of the disaster. When we're talking of intensity, we are looking at the level of destruction and devastation caused by the disaster. The level of destruction and devastation caused by the disaster. That's the intensity of a disaster. On this, I'll give an example of an earthquake. An earthquake which is centered in a city, and the same earthquake should be centered in a remote area, whereby in cities we have a lot of buildings, a lot of tall buildings, I can say upstairs buildings, okay? While in a remote area, it's just houses without, there are no tall houses or buildings in a remote area. So the level of destruction will differ. But then all the areas are stricken by an earthquake. Let's think of a city. The same earthquake will destroy a lot of things, offices, because if it's an upstairs, there could be one building would be considered as maybe having two houses at once, okay? They just the heat. So the level of destruction will be different, but then it will be affected by one natural hazard, which is earthquake. So that's the intensity of the disaster, the level of destruction. So that's also one of the characteristics of a natural disaster. Another I think those are the characteristics. There are three. We have talked of the scope of the disaster. Under the scope, we're looking at the range of its effect, either geographically or in terms of the number of victims. I gave an example of a road accident, whereby a bus accident with 100 people died, has a greater scope than a collapsed bridge while only two cars are crossing. Another characteristic is the number of casualties. These are people who died or get injured on the spot. Two types were classified into two: multiple casualty and mass casualty. And lastly, we looked at the intensity of the disaster, the level of destruction of the disaster. That will take us to factors contributing to disasters. Factors contributing to disasters. The first factor is the host factor. Host factors. Who is a host? A host is a person or a human being who experiences the disaster. So it's the one who call a host. Host factor. A human being who experiences the disaster. So the host factor will contribute to the likelihood of experiencing a disaster. For example, age. General health. We can talk of psychological factors and the socioeconomic factors. Remember, a host is a human being who experiences the disaster. Host factors are one of the factors that contribute to disasters. So I'm talking of a host human being who contribute to the likelihood of that human being to experience a disaster. So we consider things like physical factors of a human being. We consider socioeconomic factors. We consider age. We consider the general health of a person and mobility. What do I mean when I'm saying socioeconomic factors? People who are poor cannot manage to construct, I can say to build houses with strong materials. They build a house depending on the money that they have. So that those houses that these people will build will make them vulnerable to disasters because they will not be strong. They don't have money to build strong houses. What about psychological factors? People who are psychologically ill, think of mad people. Think of the depressed and the stressed. They'll be vulnerable to disasters. Remember, when we're talking of disaster, we're not only looking at natural disasters. We are looking at both man-made and natural disasters. Somebody commits suicide, that's a disaster. Because psychologically that person is not okay. And then we're talking of mobility. Some people are, on talking of mobility, we are looking at the vertical, the horizontal, okay? Horizontal mobility, vertical mobility. People move from one status to another. So a status of a person will also have will be a contributing factor in disasters. Think of people from the lower class and compare them with people from the higher class or the middle class. We will find out that those people from the lower class will be vulnerable to disasters. Think of the food that these people eat. We are experiencing cholera. If we look around, those people who are suffering from cholera now, they are those people from the lower class, living in slums, squatters and slums, because the environment they are living in, the food that they are eating, is not healthy, it's not good for their health. So those people are more likely to suffer from natural disasters. I mean, not natural disasters, we can say disasters, hazardous events. Look at age, the aged. You can't compare someone who is 85 to a person who is 25 years. So sometimes age will be a contributing factor to a disaster, because the aged cannot be able to take care of themselves. They need someone, they need a helping hand. So that will make them vulnerable to disasters. So we're looking at host factor as one of the factors that contribute to disasters. The second factor is an agent factor. AGENT, agent factor. The agent is the natural or technological element that causes the disaster. The agent is the natural or technological element that causes the disaster. So, something that causes something, that's an agent factor. For example, for volcanic eruption to be there, it is the lava that causes the eruption. Okay? So a lava is the agent factor of volcanic eruption. So we need to also consider the cause of a thing, a cause of a hazardous event. We can talk of industries. Mostly, we're looking at industries. They are chemicals that causes natural disasters. Those chemicals are the agent factor. We can talk of accidents, okay? For an accident to occur, a road accident to occur, it's because maybe the driver was careless, okay? So here, a careless driver is the agent factor of a natural disaster. Sometimes can be negligence. If you fail to adhere to the safety policies in an industry, you're more likely to cause disasters. So one of the factors to consider in disaster are the agent factors. Elements that causes the disaster. Careless driver, lovers, negligence, failing to adhere to the safety policies. We're talking of chemicals, irresponsible driver. These are the agent factors of the disaster. Another factor is an environmental factor. Environmental factors. Those factors that could potentially contribute to or mitigate to a disaster, they are under environmental factors. I'll give an example of an environmental factor that is contributing to a disaster. The presence of flood-prone areas is a natural factor. We are talking of the presence of industries that produces harmful chemicals. Okay? We have industries that are producing chemicals. Obviously, those chemicals have got an impact to the environment. We're talking of level of compliance with building codes or safety policies. That's one of the environmental factors that can cause hazards. Let's look at the community's level of preparedness. If the community is not preparing for a natural disaster, that can be under environmental factor. The community is supposed to prepare for a disaster. Questions on the factors contributing to disasters? Environmental factors. These are factors that could potentially contribute or mitigate a disaster. They can contribute or cause a disaster. But then you're looking at this side of the environment. They can cause a disaster on the environment. So I gave an example of presence of flood-prone areas or rivers, lakes, or streams. If in an area you have flood-prone rivers, you have rivers, but then you see that many rivers are those places they'll be more likely to be affected by flash floods. Ikazaza mesinje ija mazazetani asetukira sibira kuma community, and that will cause a harmful event to surround area. We will talk of presence of industries that produces harmful chemicals. Those harmful chemicals will have an impact on the environment. They can cause air pollution, land pollution. So we are looking at the impact of that, the presence of that thing on the environment. I think we are now together. The impact of the presence of a certain thing on the environment. That's one of the environmental factors that causes natural disaster. Or just say disasters. Have I made myself clear? Okay. That will take us to the last phase of our class today. That's phases of a disaster. We have pre-impact. So it's a table. Dear Sego, I don't have a marker. You can go get a marker at the reception.